Welcome to the Vitruvian Man podcast. This is your host Vinamre Kasanaa. Today I have with me my friend from back home, Hardik Tuteja. He's working in the cannabis industry right now, and it's a really disruptive industry. So I'd like to hear his thoughts about it. Without any further ado, let's start the podcast. Thank you so much, Hardik. Thank you for
Thanks
being
for
here,
having me,
man.
bro. Good to be here.
Likewise, likewise. So let's just talk about the cannabis industry first, man. I mean, there's just the public opinion is divided. Some people think it should be legalized. Some people think it should not be legalized. Canada has recreationally legalized marijuana now. We're sitting in Massachusetts, which has also legalized it, right? And you're working in Atlanta
Right.
for a cannabis software firm that makes software for cannabis businesses like dispensaries and farms. So, like, what is the tech world's take on cannabis? Is it in? Is it out? Like, what's happening?
Well, the tech world is always forward thinking, right?
Right.
The social aspect does affect it a little bit, but technology, well, in the cannabis industry, it's all about efficiency. It's all about making sure the government knows where the plants are. It's
Right.
making sure that the legal regulations that are put on businesses, they follow them, and it's easy for them to make it happen.
Okay.
So the tech industry itself in cannabis is not divided at all. The focus is right now, the vibe, the energy is amazing because the industry itself is at such a point where it's a $6-7 billion industry at this point, so it's not a small industry at all.
Right.
And every year for the next 8 years, it's projected to go 25%. So over a $50 billion industry in the next 6 to 7 years. So very dynamic, exponentially growing right now. So, and that's one of the reasons that I love working in the industry, that the overall sentiment that people share, it's very optimistic. A lot of people are making money. There's a lot of changes happening. Doctors, engineers, scientists, architects, everyone's just pouring in the industry. Obviously, because we're realizing more and more health benefits, but the social stigma behind it is also changing. The past 5 years I've been in the US, I've personally seen the social image of cannabis change myself, right? Even in India, uh, if I remember, if when I came to college, if I mentioned anything about cannabis to my parents, that would be a big no-no. But at this point, they're very well aware of what I do and where I work, and they understand the benefits too. And part of it is me explaining them the true benefits, but also even in a country like India, the social scene, the stigma behind this is changing. So I think it's a really good time for the industry in every aspect. The social aspect, the technology aspect, the economical aspect. Things are looking really good.
That's really awesome. That your parents now see it in a different light, even though like India is still a couple of years behind. It's gonna take a while till it fully gets legalized. But you're saying it's a really disruptive and exponential industry in the sense that nothing like this has happened before. It's just like the dawn of the internet almost. When the internet first came around, we did not know how it was going to revolutionize our lives, and now everything we do, including this podcast, is going to be on the internet.
Yeah.
So do you think the cannabis industry is going to have that same sort of impact where cannabis becomes as universal as cigarettes or alcohol?
Yes, I think so, but comparing it to the internet is not a right analogy because internet is the basis of everything today, right?
Okay.
Cannabis is it's going to become a commodity.
Okay.
I think cannabis, you can look at it like beer.
Mm-hmm.
5-6 years down the road in the US, there's going to be two kinds of operations. One will be Bud Light, Heineken, the high volume, massive scale operations that just target the masses.
Right.
And the other one will be craft cannabis, like super nice, super small businesses that differentiate in their products.
Right.
And that won't be in flowers per se, but edibles and vape pens. Imagine cannabis restaurants, cannabis bakeries, right? Like
Right.
they're they're good products in themselves, but they also happen to have cannabis.
Right.
So
Right.
that's where I'd compare it to the beer industry. So like beer, there's Heineken, but then there's
Craft
mini,
beers also, like
exactly,
like
like microbreweries.
IPAs, I microbreweries. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So very similar model I see there.
So like we will have, and I know this for a fact. I think it's Pepsi or Coca Cola who's now investing in a cannabis infused CBD infused drink in Canada or something. So there's going to be the Coca Cola of cannabis, and also what's a good example for that? The kombucha of cannabis. Like the more like hipster kind of like
Yeah.
boutique vibe, catering to a certain norm or having a certain niche around it. That's really interesting, man. So you're working as a consultant Flourish, which is a company that sells software, right? Will you talk more about your job? What is it exactly that you do?
So I'll talk more about my company first, what they
Okay.
do, and how they provide value to businesses.
Right.
So cannabis businesses, because they're regulated in any medical or recreational state, they're required to report each and every single plant throughout the growth stage to the government. So the government has a data system that they use to manage all this.
Every single plant is tracked.
Yes, every single plant is
Even if I
tagged.
have 10,000 plants.
Yeah, every single plant has to be tagged. There's a barcode
Okay.
that is tagged, and there's a state system. But these businesses, they're in a lot of pain because the state system is not as user friendly. It takes
Right.
a lot of time to manage the data, upload it. So our software sits on top of that and streamlines and makes it easy for these cannabis businesses to report the data to the government. But not only that, since we have so much data and we have information, we let them do a lot more. So it's like a warehouse management software, but for cannabis businesses. So, for example, it's a step ahead because cannabis is a living organism, so there's a lot you can do with it. So let's say, for example, this farm grows a batch of weed, and it's a really good batch, right? And they want to replicate it again. Now we integrate with temperature, humidity, pH sensors, your irrigation systems, so we know the exact condition the plant was brought up in. And if
Right.
we have that data, and if we can replicate those conditions with the same genetics, we can produce the exact same plant again. So
Wow.
these are some value add-ons that we provide. Also, if someone buys an edible at a dispensary and something's wrong with it, they can come there and we can trace the individual plant that was put in it from what farm, from what
And then
batch.
get the problem at the source.
Yeah, like we know
That's
the
crazy.
exact batch it came from, what conditions it grew in it,
Right.
what pesticides and what nutrients it was fed.
Yeah.
So it's basically tracking that entire
So,
process.
so in the unlikely case that someone, let's just say, is get hysteria or panic attacks from a certain edible, then you can get that person's medical report as well as that plant's like origin and see like what exactly happened and what it caused.
Yep.
So in the case, it also helps you with the legal stuff because then no one can sue you. Like you gave me a bad brownie.
Exactly, and that's part of the regulation. That's why the
Okay.
government needs each business to track it. So
Right.
situations like this, the businesses have data to present. But our company, just makes life easier for them because we let them do a lot more with that too. So you have your inbound orders, you're sending out orders, basically putting it all together, you're reporting your dashboards, everything together in one place. That's what the company does.
Okay.
Now, me, I'm an industrial engineer by background, and I did a lot of supply chain stuff.
What is supply chain stuff for the viewers who don't know?
So, for example, in this cannabis world, there's farms, and then there's edible manufacturers that take flower from the farms, and then there's distributors and retail, right?
Okay.
So it's four different entities in a chain:
Firms,
farms,
farms,
and then edible manufacturers,
edible manufacturers,
distributors, and dispensaries.
dispensaries. Okay.
Right. So farms will cultivate flower.
Right.
They'll sell flower to manufacturers, which will convert to oil, edibles, whatever you like.
Right.
And then distributors will either pick up flower from farms or products from manufacturers and distribute it to dispensaries.
And then
So-
dispensaries will ultimately give it to the consumer.
Consumer, yes.
Okay.
So that this farm to dispensary is a supply chain
I
with
see,
different
I see.
entities
Right.
and different transactions within that.
Okay.
Right? And my education was to basically how to optimize the inventory and orders, everything, streamline and optimize this entire chain. So part of my job is to how to best design the software, listen to customers' problems, make sure they're successful, and that involves some technical stuff. But I only need to have a technical understanding and communicate it to the computer scientists to make those adjustments.
Right. How do you define success for the business in the cannabis industry?
Well, money, like
Of course.
that's prime.
Okay.
And in any business, the success can be measured in terms of money.
Right.
That's the biggest, right? And by money, I mean profits. Profits at the end of every quarter.
Right.
The growth rate, and then if you want to get into more depth, then their employee turnaround rates, like
Right.
how can
But
the
that's
but like
the,
any business.
Yeah,
like,
that's like the standard. What I mean to
Yeah.
say specifically is that since cannabis itself, especially in the US, because we're in the US right now, it's such an undeveloped industry that the layperson only sees it as, okay, cannabis is legal now and that's it. there's such a black hole, a sort of blindness around what is it in the cannabis industry, what are the jobs, how do I get into it, how do I get success in the industry, who are the main people. So I guess what I want to ask you is like, how do you enter this industry in the first place? What sort of skills do you have for that?
So I don't think it's different than any other industry. It's
Okay.
just it's cannabis, so it becomes special.
It's yeah, right, right,
That's
right.
psychologically right. But at the
Yeah.
end of the day, you can compare it to seafood farming, right? Like getting fish, and or even farming, right? Normal farming. It's a living organism that we cultivate,
Yeah.
and we've engineered through the years to fit our needs and lower costs and all that stuff.
Right.
So it's no different than any other industry. What makes it a little different is one, the social scene around it,
Okay.
two, the legality around it. It's not federally
Right.
legal, so there's no like big billion-dollar companies right now in the play, right? So there's a lot of startups, emerging companies. So I mean, first of all, it's for people who are a little they're fine with taking risks, because at the end of the day, it is a risky industry.
Right.
Tomorrow, if the government on a federally legal level just criminalize all these businesses are shut, right?
Right.
Or something happened last year where banks stopped processing their transactions, which was a big hiccup in the industry.
So how did you guys recover from that?
Well, I mean, there's ways around it. There's people, a lot of dispensaries, they take cash only, so
Okay.
they literally sit with tens of millions of dollars in cash in
In their
their,
dispensary.
well, not necessarily in
But
their storage, yeah,
right.
right,
Okay.
wherever they want to store it, but it's super unsafe,
Right.
and that's only because of the regulation that the government has forced and the banks not cooperating with them.
Yeah.
But the point being, I didn't try to get in the cannabis industry. The company just pivoted that way.
And you were
And
just in the right point at the right
yes,
time.
I was the first employee.
Okay.
So when I got in the company, we had no clients. We were working on this warehouse management software, not for cannabis, just for
Right.
normal warehouses, distribution centers. Super related to my education, but I still wasn't interested in it because it's boring.
Right.
It wasn't as dynamic. Right?
Warehouses are grim, dark, and depressing. It's like numbers, boxes.
Yes, and most of them are old white people that work there.
Right.
Not forward thinking.
Right.
They don't want change. They hate technology.
Right,
So
right.
it is not fun and
I
very
can see that.
challenging. But then I graduated and I was looking at different job offers, and the CEO calls me and he's like, we found some investors in this. The industry needs some good software, and we're supply chain people, we're engineers, and our perspective will be very valuable in the industry. And me, I personally am a big advocate of cannabis.
Right.
I'm a
So
recreational
am I.
user, and I understand the medical benefits, and I also understand just the social image behind it is causing so much harm and not unleashing the true benefits
Right.
of the plant. So I'd say like I'm passionate for the cause in a way. So I took the offer, and fortunately we got a
Right.
bunch of clients. We grew, and like the industry also is growing. So yeah, I love to be here, and I like that everyone in the industry is very young, very chill. They a lot of the growers have been growers who've been growing illegally
For
in
so
the
long.
in
So
the
now
dark.
they have the opportunity to just do it
Yeah, but
legally.
they're still the same people. Like they're
Right.
still laid back.
Yeah.
Right. So it's good, and the people like outside perspectives. It's not like they're not open to technology. They're like, oh, screw technology. It's all you tech nerds, but they're very open to it because they also understand that the industry is at a point where they need technology to scale and to be
Right.
competitive.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about right before the podcast was how you were describing how the growers before cannabis was federally legal in a lot of states was that they were the sort of people who would be really good growers if it was a small batch of plants in a certain environment, right? And it would all be done in a pseudo scientific way, right? Like you have passion for this plant.
Yeah.
You want to smoke it. You want to spread it to your friends. You want to make money. At the same time, there's not a lot of systematization, not a lot of standardization as to how to go about it.
Right.
So what you mentioned to me was really interesting. You said that because the industry expanded and engineers and data scientists came on, the industry was able to scale up, and
Yeah.
these people were riding on the wave of change. So I'm curious as to you said one segment of this industry is just the sort of laid back average California grower that you see, right? What are some of the other people that you meet in this industry? I know one thing you mentioned was everyone is young.
Yeah. So like I go to a lot of networking events, and that's why I'm here. I'm going to one tomorrow,
Right.
right? I meet all kinds of people. In California, I'm working with plastic surgeons and neurosurgeons that are investing in an indoor farm, right? Because they understand the true benefits. But when would you think that I'm gonna be hanging out with a neurosurgeon trying to invest in a cannabis business,
Yeah,
right? So
it's unlikely.
it's a wide array celebrities, right? All
Right.
celebrities are deep into it. Anyone with money right now
Hmm.
who understands the industry is trying to get in it. So the answer is literally everyone from all fields.
It's so interesting because not a lot of people make it very public. Like one of the things about this is like at least the news outlets that I've read is like you may have a lot of celebrities, and correct me if I'm wrong, but not all of them are very public about it. And is that because of the stigma? Is that because of they're still like somewhat
I guess it's a
wishy
personal
washy?
choice at the end of the day, but I'd say a lot of celebrities are. Look at Dan Bilzerian,
He's got a cannabis farm.
dude, like that's all he promotes. His Instagram for the past 6 months is all cannabis.
That's
He has a
crazy.
brand Ignite, uh, and Jimmy Buffett. He partnered with our client, like even
Right.
older. He's not a young dude. He's on the
He's
older
pretty
side
old.
of
Yeah.
things. Yeah, he has a brand called Reefer, and he's partnering with one of our clients to launch it. So I think all celebrities were in it. A lot of them, all
Right.
rappers, Snoop Dogg, Wiz
Of course,
Khalifa.
rappers have to be there
Yeah, so
inevitably.
um, I think they're public. I don't think so. If you're a celebrity and you're in a business, that's your
Mm-hmm.
job to promote it. That's
Right.
the only way you
Right.
make money. So what's the point in not being
So
public?
so is cannabis the cannabis industry, is it gonna exponentially explode just in the US, or is it gonna happen in other Western countries also that you know of?
So to answer that question, let's talk about how cannabis was criminalized,
Okay, let's do that.
right? So I mean, it's an opinion that I'd say that that's the reason. Not everyone will agree with me, but basically, Mexicans came to the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, cannabis was legal everywhere, everywhere in the world, most places. Even in the U.S., I think it was in 1930s or 40s, you would get tax credit if you grew hemp plants in your
Right.
farm,
That's so
right?
interesting.
So it was promoted because it was health benefits. It's
Mm-hmm.
a cheap plant to grow. You can do a lot more with it. But then the social image behind it changed when Mexicans came in, and the U.S. ended up criminalizing it, and then all the countries within the next few years followed, without any reason, without any like they didn't know what was
It
going
was a
on.
ripple effect.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
They just followed what the U.S. did. Um, so to answer your question, now that the U.S. is taking a big stance in legalizing it, one of the first countries that has legalized it on a big scale, I don't think it's going to take very long for it to, uh, for the same effect to happen and for countries to start
Right.
decriminalizing it. Greece, it's already decriminalized. They
But
can
not
grow.
legal.
No, it's legal now. You can. There's bills that have been passed that you can grow legally now. Argentina. There's a Georgia, the
Canada
country.
is one
Canada, obviously. Canada is gonna be known as one of the pioneers.
of the cannabis
Yeah,
industry.
well, the U.S. and then Canada, but Canada is faster because they legalize it on the entire nation's thing. So
Right.
that brings a lot more opportunities into play in terms of big companies like Marlboro and Coca-Cola getting in the game.
Right.
Companies going public, cannabis companies going public through Canada. So it's a big step that Canada has taken. And I think it's going to be very beneficial to them.
Mm-hmm.
But Australia is also medically legalized, so
Really?
everyone's following it. Yeah,
That is crazy.
yeah. So also because of how cannabis is now shown, in the pop culture or movies and everything, more so the social scene behind is changing. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And as people our age or even a little older, they get into lawmaking and policy making, which will happen in the next 5 7
Right.
years. Their image of cannabis is way different than 60-year-old men, white men in the U.S.
Yeah.
Government right now. So I think things will change faster than we think.
That's crazy, man. Yesterday night we were talking about policies and laws regarding cannabis, and I know for a fact that a lot of millennials actively, voraciously, actively support, the legalization of cannabis, working in the cannabis industry. There's such a huge support for cannabis as if this was the '60s, back then when with the whole peace and love movement, people were all praised for cannabis and psychedelics. So, but now there's data scientists, now there's policymakers, all sorts of things. So, my question to you is: there's certainly an element of, like, despite the fact that cannabis is booming right now, there's still the idea that if a government makes it easy, then they basically fear either either letting the industry go out of control. You know what I mean? If they don't regulate it properly. And so one of the things you told me was that, especially earlier in this conversation, was that banks, like they stopped promoting cannabis money. So how has the industry recovered from that?
Well, even with all this, the cannabis industry is booming and states are legalizing it. So I don't think there was a recovery phase anyway, because it's always been growing and it's always been on the up. And
Right.
at the end of the day, what matters to even the government is tax revenue, right? They're making a bunch of money. Everyone's making a bunch of money. It's not like people are not smoking if it's not legalized. Weed
Right.
is so easily accessible everywhere. So I think the government is taking big steps. Obviously it's a slow process. It's a
Mm-hmm.
big country, and there's a lot of technicalities that go into legalizing something, a Schedule One drug on a federal level. So I
Right.
don't think like it's just taking time. It's on the up. There's no recovery or anything. It's just been growing. It just grows at a certain rate.
Right.
It's not like overnight we can change things, and cannabis is
What are
like
some of the industries that cannabis has sort of shadowed over now that it's come?
opioids, for
Opioids?
sure. Yeah, Colorado I think has been legal for 5 years. Opioid crisis or opioid prescriptions went down by 25-30%.
That's crazy.
That's a fourth. Yeah, it's significant. So yeah, pharmaceuticals, opioids is taking the biggest hit, because weed can be a replacement for a lot
For
of
most
opiates.
things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, but the reason I actually asked you that question is because you mentioned something about how the cannabis industry is now using another disruptive industry, which is blockchain technology. How they're using cryptocurrency and blockchain systems to basically facilitate cannabis transactions, which they cannot do with like regular money.
right.
So could you talk a bit more about that?
Well, blockchain is something that is going to change everything. I am a huge blockchain
I know that. By
believer.
the way, for the viewers, Hardik is also a massive cryptocurrency enthusiast. Try to get everyone in our town to get into it. We didn't listen to him. Sad times. He's almost a millionaire now.
Dude, that is absolutely false.
I
First of
mean,
all,
close to a millionaire. But my point is, let's not talk about his personal wealth. You can DM him later on. But what's the confluence of cannabis and blockchain? How do they connect?
both of them are growing industries. They're buzzwords.
Right.
Everyone loves it.
Yeah.
We put it on our website and our traffic goes up.
Yeah.
Like
Cannabis, blockchain,
yeah,
cryptocurrency.
exactly. So I think blockchain. To understand how it's gonna change cannabis, first we need to understand what blockchain is, right?
Okay.
So,
Quick
and I
2 minute
think,
lesson.
and I think you should buy Bitcoin right now.
This man has the right predictions. Follow them.
Uh, Blockchain is the new internet. So
Okay.
think about all the industries internet has disrupted. Every
So
single
many.
one.
So
Not so many, every single one.
Okay.
It's a new way of life,
Right.
and that's how blockchain is going to be. Internet is the sharing of information, so copy paste.
Mm-hmm.
You put information, you share content, and everyone you can spread it to everyone.
Right.
Now blockchain, since there's so much value and wealth on the internet, blockchain is a game changer because now it introduces asset transfer, cut paste. So if you own
From
something,
copy paste to cut paste.
yes, but a mix of both, right? So they're going to work together. So
Okay.
if you own something and like I'm trying to buy it from you, instead of going through all the steps, anywhere you're in the world, we put our contract on the smart contract on a blockchain, which
Mm-hmm.
cannot be altered or anything. It's very secure, and you transfer me the tokens or the money or Bitcoin or any other crypto,
Right.
and I transfer that online digital asset to you. So
Okay.
so the trust in a third party like a bank or a legal firm is gone, because now technology takes that role,
Right.
right? And so we don't need to trust in a third party. We
Technology is the third party in that sense.
Exactly, technology is a platform now which acts as a third party, right? But
Right.
it's
Right.
it's, it's not necessarily a third party, because
Okay.
there's no party. It's a chain that we both are on. There's
I
no
see.
other entity, but that's the beauty,
Right.
right? That's the beauty of it, that it
So no one regulates it. No one.
no, it's decentralized. That's the whole value prop. And
I
I can
see.
get into the technical details of it, but basically, if you heard of Bitcoin mining, you can have a computer that mines Bitcoin, which basically, if there's a transaction on the blockchain,
Right.
the computer will solve the puzzle, and the computer that solves the puzzle, new Bitcoin will generate for them as a reward. So it's a self-sustaining and
Wow.
self-growing. It's a self-growing thing. Yeah, exactly.
That's
So
crazy.
yeah, and that's just one level. Like the crazy part, if I start talking about the technicalities of it and
Right.
how much value it adds and how it combines finance, technology, and economics, it's beautiful. So that's why I think it's gonna disrupt each and every industry. Cannabis, especially, because of the regulation, because banks don't cooperate with that with a lot of farms, so they have to carry like tens of millions of dollars of cash, which is not safe and which doesn't make sense. So crypto tokens can, if they hold value, they can be used to exchange value between farms and manufacturers and dispensaries within the supply chain, which consumers then eventually can also use tokens to buy it.
Right.
Right, so that way I think just the regulation piece itself makes blockchain and crypto special for cannabis, because right now at this point
Yeah.
banks are not cooperating, right?
Yeah.
And then to take it a step further, as I talked about the temperature, humidity, pH data for each plant being recorded, if you purchase a plant from a dispensary from that, and if the entire history has been recorded in the blockchain, the token that you receive will also hold that data, the temperature, humidity. So
Yeah.
like everything from when it's grown to when it's sold is tracked within the blockchain.
That's
So
crazy. Like that's such a big progressive deviation from buying sketch as weed
yeah,
from the alley with a guy in a coat, and you
yeah.
give him like a $20 bill and he gives you like half an eighth. Then you go
And you
back to
don't
your
know what you're
friends. You
smoking.
don't know what you're smoking. You go back to your friends, right? You smell it. It smells kind of shady. Then you roll up a joint. Then you smoke it. The next day, you don't feel too well. You don't know what it is, but there's no way to track that.
Right.
There's no way to go back to the source and what happened, because it's such like an
Unregulated.
under the rug industry. Like it's like a thing. It's a hush hush conversation essentially.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised to see how technology is basically drawing out all these little elements and making it like an absolutely acceptable part of society,
Yeah.
and something that everyone is getting into.
And it's already happening. It has happened, right now. Weed is recreationally legal in 9 states in the US. So you can literally, like a liquor store, you can go and buy weed in 9 states.
Right.
Medically, 30 states. That's 60% of the US states. So it's not like it will change. It's already changing. It's already happening.
Right.
It's there already.
Can we expect to see the cannabis industry coming out on in the top 5 industries of the US by 2020? Is that too ambitious?
Yeah, I can't, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know where it's gonna go, but I don't think so. There's much bigger industries in the US. So yeah, but I think it's coming. Good times are coming up for cannabis. They're
Good
already
times for
here.
cannabis. But okay, that's pretty interesting, man. I did want to ask you about so you already mentioned that you just kind of got lucky because your company was a warehouse consulting firm, and then they decided to ride the wave of innovation and got into cannabis. But there's obviously a certain kind of, I would say, acumen or a level of intellect, or just a certain level of knowledge you need to function in an industry which is still growing, and to work and thrive in that. So my question to you is, what are some of the skills that you acquired or have acquired in this time and your time in college, because I know you went to Georgia Tech, which enabled that sort of thinking? Because not everyone, let's say, not every liberal arts major can go and work in the cannabis industry and say that just because I love weed and I love the cause, I can work and actually propound that industry. Because it's a lot of data, like you described. It's a lot of systems. It's not as simple as I just have love for the flowers, so give me a job.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But I mean, there is roles for people like liberal arts majors too. But as you said, it's not as easy. But I think, well, what I studied and my interests, fortunately, give me a lot of opportunities. Technology is one sector that gives you a lot of options, right? So, in terms of jobs, in terms of networking, in terms of what you want to do, technology can be applied to anything. So
right,
in that way, I got lucky, right? But I chose to, when I came to the US, I came in as a biomedical engineer. That's
right,
where my passion is, right? Like biology, the human body, the human brain. But coming here, you realize that you don't have a lot of opportunities in that field. Being an international student with all the visa shit, it doesn't enable a lot of options.
right,
So my goal after coming to the US was, I have 4 years and I need to extend my stay here, for another 3 years. For that, I need to have a job. Now, what's something that will give me the most options for jobs? So I ended up switching to industrial engineering, which is like supply chain, the math of business. I've always been a math person too.
Mm-hmm.
So I chose it because I didn't know what I want to do, but I was open to options. And by being open to options, my goal was to enable as many options for me as possible.
Right.
Right. So I chose something that I saw a lot of value in terms of extending my stay here, giving more opportunities. So during my college time, I studied a lot with on the IE side, on the supply chain side of things, which gave me good value, good skills, but I wasn't super into college, right?
Right.
And then that's when I started.
What were you into instead?
I started organizing events. I got
Okay.
in the party business in Atlanta.
How's that?
It's going really well. It's a lot of fun. I like to party, and now I make money
By the way,
partying.
fun fact, side note, I went to stay at his place in Atlanta. So, if there's one thing you should know about Hardik, it's just these two words. Uh, so I go to his place, fancy apartment, all of that. And Hardik's in the shower. I asked Hardik, "Hey Hardik, what's your Wi-Fi?" He says it's yo with like 7 O's. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty Hardik. And then I go and enter the password, and I ask him, "What's the password?" He says, "Party 123," and that's it, and that's it. And ever since then, everything I've known about Hardik has just revolved around that. Like I just love the way you live your life, man. It's just like you work so hard in the day, you know, working in an industry that you love, spreading cannabis, smoking cannabis, and then, doing this party stuff. So how do you manage all of these different facets of life? Promotion, there's the whole promotion business, and then there's like your job, and then there's your also like your legal status also. So how do you just connect all of that
It's definitely not sustainable. It's not like
as a
I can
lifestyle?
yeah, it's not. But while I'm young and while I'm free, I think I can. It's been going well so far. I take care of myself too. I go work out and shit. But I don't think it's like it's cliche or stereotypical to say do what you love, but I
Right.
fucking love doing it. So
That's
it's
it.
like
That's it.
like the party stuff. People are like, hey, why you on the phone? Like, you're on the phone. Like, I'm so stressed. Like 3 days before my event.
Right.
Running here and there.
Yeah. So, by the way, fun fact: Hardik is also the main guy in this promotions company at Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's called Sideways Promotions. Massive monopolizer of Latin culture. Just throws Latin parties nonstop. First Indian kid to find that market and make the most out of it. I find that like fucking like weird and fantastic at the same time. Because you can be an event promoter and manager. But what if you just get one community of people and be like, I'm gonna be your party promoter. I'm gonna like make all the parties for you guys. They're like, yes, Hardik, that's awesome.
But I mean, I don't just do Latin events, but those are my favorite and those are my most
Exactly.
successful ones. But that also came out because of my love for Hispanic culture and women and
100%. I mean, there's nothing in appreciating beauty, man.
yeah, for sure.
And even if that's the bud of a cannabis or the bud of a beer or a woman, I don't know.
I really enjoy their company. Hispanic people in general.
In general, of course.
And I love the
great,
music.
Great culture. Great
I
music.
love the music.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got into the party business and I networked. I made some good connections with that. Like even my full-time job, I didn't apply or anything. One of my friends met the CEO at a party, and the CEO was like, "Hey, I'm ready with the software. I'm looking for a technical guy with a
Right.
business acumen and business side." And my friend was like, "Hey, I know the right guy for you." And I got an internship, and I ended up working. I applied to 0 companies for my full time.
Yeah.
And just because of networking and just because of this party thing, so I got into that game in Atlanta. Just made a lot of connections, and it's easier, way easier to make connections when you're fucked up.
Right.
And if it's your event, then
Right.
it's even
It's just a
easier.
natural thing. Like if you're fucked up, it's your event. You're just gonna talk. to
Yeah,
people, right?
exactly. Yeah, and
So-
you connect and you bond, and
Yeah.
you share a good time, and that's what matters.
So quick tip on networking. Anything.
Quick tip on networking. Just don't be like, think of the other person as also a person, right? Like if someone approaches you, how would you react to it? Would you be like, oh shit, fuck this dude? Or you'd be, what would be your standard state? You'd be
Right.
open to a conversation.
Right.
But that's what you gotta keep in your head. So if you want to talk to someone, just go talk to them, right? They're just another person, and it's not like the worst that could happen is they could say no. They won't probably say no to what
Right.
you say. They'll be open to a conversation, and that's when you can
So
you
be
know, take
open
it-
minded. Don't assume the negative about that person.
yeah, exactly. And know your value, right?
Right.
Know what you are, know who you are, and know where you're at.
Know what
And
what your
and
market value is.
be comfortable in it. Be comfortable in it. No matter how big or small it is, just be comfortable.
Such fine words.
Huh?
Such fine words.
I mean,
But they are
I'm
true.
not,
They are
yeah.
true. Awesome, man. Awesome. How are we on the time right now? Okay. So let's just quickly start wrapping it up. We learned a lot. We discussed cryptocurrency at length. We discussed the cannabis industry's future. We discussed how STEM majors have a better chance in the cannabis industry. We discussed how the world is being revolutionized by the number of jobs that the cannabis industry is making. We discussed like everything from the sort of skills you must have. But if there's one thing that I would say, another industry that you're particularly fascinated by, the one that you also see has tremendous growth, what industry would that be?
Well, I'm super heavily involved in cannabis and blockchain right now, but another industry that's coming up is, I'd say, artificial intelligence,
Artificial intelligence. Yeah.
also like virtual augmented reality. I'm not a huge advocate of either of those,
Okay.
uh, because I think they're very powerful
Mm-hmm.
and very scary. Uh,
Right. I mean, it's
it's
such a
not like
polarizing debate.
it's
Also.
not like AI is gonna take over and it's gonna go against humanity, and they're
Right.
gonna destroy it. But one group of humans can use it against
Definitely.
another group of humans. So it's a new weapon, which I don't understand enough. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why it makes me a little nervous.
Right.
But I think lots of stuff coming up, and lots of good things too. It exists because it's good, it brings
Right.
a lot of value. It's a game changer in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. And since this is now we live in a world of information and not assets, this information is what can be monetized on, and AI is basically a new way of, making this information more useful, being able to predict.
I really
Being
love
more
what you say about information over assets. Like, when you say assets, do you mean like
like physical assets.
physical
Yeah.
assets? So our generation now is interested in is just help me unpack this. Just consuming information, creating information, and not owning assets. Like what's, because I know for a fact like if I look back at my dad, or if you look back at like people who were born in the 60s, the 70s, who are now like 40, 50, 55 right now, right? Their primary inclination is to get as many assets as possible, right? And I find it like, especially millennials now, they're huge supporters of renting stuff,
Yeah.
of even ride sharing is one thing, and we're not particularly interested in assets. So like, why is that? Like, how is information money?
Well, because everything is digital now, right? We have a real world. I mean, it's not like property doesn't have value today. It's still a valuable, investment or a valuable asset to put your money in. But a lot of our time is also spent in the digital virtual world, right?
Attention is
So
currency.
yes, exactly. And there's lots of information, and there's big data.
Right.
Like I'm using like a buzzword, but
It's
it's the
true.
truth, right? And now it's easier to understand trends and understand populations from the information world, so it inherently holds value,
Right.
right? So I think that's why spending your time on digital in the virtual world, assessing information, being a part of this information community also makes us involved in it. And that's why, the more and more people that are in it, the more valuable that information will become. And that's why I think uh, we live in a world of information and not physical assets.
I feel that. Awesome, man. And on that note, let's finish this podcast with an awesome promotion, because Hardik is now also designing his t-shirts. Shameless plug. The shirt
Not
that he's
t-shirts, man. Nice button downs like
nice
this.
button-down
Custom
shirts.
made.
He's got an awesome Instagram. You can follow it. What's it? Hardik Tuteja. Is that it?
Yeah, man.
So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Instagram at the Hardik Tuteja. That's HARDIKTUTEJA. And then you can follow him on Instagram. Send him DMs. Talk to him about the cannabis industry. If you're interested to know more about it, talk to him about cryptocurrency. Talk to him about parties. He's your man. This is the Vitruvian Man podcast, and I'll see you next week. Sayonara, motherfuckers.
Thanks, guys.